Hi, I'm Charlie, and today we're going to install the U.S. Water System's backwashing filter. Depending on what your water problems are, depends on what actual type of media we will put inside this filter. So this video isn't really to explain that as much as it is to just how to install this and some of the things to look for and to think about during the installation. So as you can see today, we have our media boxes marked as carbon. You may be doing sediment filtration with like filter ag or something different, but basically the installation procedure is the same for all these. This video will cover the commercial series as well as the Fusion NLT or the Fusion line of backwashing super filters. So the first thing I want to talk about is what you will get. Now, when we ship this system out, obviously this tank will be in a box, but the tank will be shipped with the inner distributor tube inside the tank. And this inner distributor tube has a perforated bottom that actually isolates the media from the water. So as the water comes down through the tank and all the media, it'll come to the bottom, go through these perforations, up this center tube, and then out to your home. So this is really the isolation point between the media and your plumbing system. With that being said, it's crucial that this thing is intact. There's no holes here, nothing's broke, so it's always a good idea to check this. You know, we ship these around, they could rattle up and down, things like that. You know, we could get a crack here. So I always just give it a good once over and look and make sure it's secured, make sure it's glued. But that will come in one separate box together, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Now, the media, depending on what you get, whether it's carbon or filter ag or you know, calcite, whatever it is that we're actually doing, we will send it in full cubic foot boxes, and then if it's a half cubic foot system like a 1054 that is a 1.5 cubic foot system, then we'll send these half cubic foot boxes. Now, when you get a full cubic foot of media, it's going to typically be in the original packaging, but when we do half cubic feet, we actually repackage that because we'll take a whole cubic foot and split it into two separate bags. So the half cubic foot box will be a little bit smaller than the full cube, but it'll have a plastic clear bag in it with the same media, but it won't necessarily have the original bag that the media was in. So if you see that, it should match this other media. It's just going to be a partial bag. Now, with a backwashing filter, we're always going to send gravel because, you know, with a backwashing filter, the crucial operation here is backwashing. So when we backwash, we want to make sure this water distributes through the tank evenly and comes up through the bed, because when we use a standard distributor like this, it's better to put the gravel around the bottom of that distributor, because that's going to allow that water to spread out, come up through the media, lift it up, and redistribute it in the tank again. So every time we sell a backwashing filter, you're going to get gravel. Now, with that being said, we want the gravel at the bottom of the tank, so we're always going to put the gravel in first. Then we're going to put the remaining of our media, whether it be carbon or filter ag or whatnot. The other thing to keep in mind is we don't send extra gravel and we don't send extra media. So when you put all the gravel in, and you're going to put all the boxes of media that we sent in, because we would never send, you know, a partial or a full bag when you need a partial. So if we send it, you need it, okay? So that's how the media is going to come. Now, the last thing that's going to be shipped with the system will actually be the control valve itself. Now, in the control valve, this particular one, I don't have the manual in it, but typically the control valve will have the manual, the installation manual in here, as well as the funnel that you will need to fill the tank. Then the actual main control valve, and then the box of the installation fittings, which I'll show you what's in that here in a second. So once you have all this stuff in, and you've made sure that you have everything that you need, what we're going to do then is decide on the location for the actual backwashing filter. Now, in this video, I can't give you a generalized location, because depending on what we're backwashing, what type of media, depends on where it's going to go in your particular water treatment line of operation. So, you know, if it was a sediment filter, it's a pretty good chance that'd be the first thing in your line of treatment. But a carbon filter could be several places. It could be used as a polishing filter. It could be used as a workhorse to remove oxidized contaminants such as iron and manganese, things like that. So it's really best to talk to your salesman and get a good idea of what treatment you have, and he'll give you a good idea of where you should put this in your particular line of treatment options. So with that being said, the most important thing is, regardless where it needs to be in your treatment scheme, you need certain things. You're going to need a drain, of course. You're going to need power to power the head, and then you're going to need access to your water pipes wherever it may be in the treatment line. So those things are important to keep in mind. Now, we do not ship connections for your water lines, and we do not ship drain line. The drain line can vary from application to application, and if you're going on really long runs, you may have to run a hard pipe instead of just a tube. Now, we do sell this, but it's kind of up to you to decide, you know, how much you need. If you need 6 foot or whatever, then you would add that to your order when you purchase this. These systems will backwash with pressure, so they're going to be able to push water up anywhere from 4 to 6 feet without a problem. The less the better, because, you know, the less back pressure, the better the backwash. But if we're going long distance horizontally or linear, then we need to make sure that we have a larger pipe. Now, this tube that will fit on there will be a 1/2 inch hose. But let's say we're going up 6 feet and then we're doing 30 feet that way. We would probably go up 6 feet with this hose and then dump into a 3/4 hard pipe. And then that 3/4 hard pipe should have a drop all the way down to the actual drain point. We don't want to create any back pressure on this. So you kind of use the best judgment to create the best drop away from this system when you're draining it. Now, if you have a local standpipe or something, then obviously we're pretty good, because then we're gravity draining immediately and we don't have to worry about it. So keep that in mind as well. So with that being said, we kind of, you know, for this video, I'm installing it on our test rack, so I really don't have a line of operation per se, but I just want to give you some of these in and outs as we go along. So we've already talked about the tank. The tank is going to be the first thing you're going to do. You're going to prepare the tank, you're going to fill it with media, and then if possible, you're going to fill it with water to help kind of saturate that media and help it settle. So I'll move some of this other stuff out of the way. Now, again, this distributor tube is crucial, okay? So once we've inspected this and it's okay, we want to make sure it's centered in the tank. If it's not centered in the tank, you can see that it'll actually protrude the top of the tank, and it won't go all the way down in there. Now, in the center of this tank, there's a little indentation that will allow this to fall right in the center of the tank, and you can kind of feel it when you move it around down there. But if you need to, you can use a flashlight too if you can't kind of tell where it is. I just found it there, and now you can see it's exactly flush. You can't even really see it now. That's how you ensure that it's in the center. If you want to use a flashlight to feel good about it, you can look down in there too, but I've done it for a while, so I can kind of feel how it goes, you know, that it's in there. But once you've done that, you know, we're going to have to use a funnel to fill this, but most importantly, we need to put duct tape over this center tube. If we don't cover this tube and we start pouring the media in and it goes in there, when you start the system up, this tube is going to empty out into your home. So we want to cover this to make sure we don't get any kind of media or gravel in here, and that'll protect it from getting into your actual home. So what we usually do is we use duct tape, or, you know, any kind of tape that you have, but duct tape, this right here is some larger electrical tape we got sitting here. I'm just going to use for this video, but typically in the field I'm using duct tape most of the time, or even masking tape will work. It's just something to kind of block this hole. But you're going to put the tape on there, then take your supplied funnel and put in the top. Now, we constantly get questions about, do I put the gravel in first, or do I put the carbon in first, or the media in first? And you always want to put the gravel in first, because the gravel is going to be at the bottom of the tank. It's going to be heavier than the media typically. So let's say you put a 1/2 cubic foot in there and then you put the gravel in. Eventually that gravel is going to make it to the bottom of the tank anyway, but we don't want to do that, you know. So we want to make sure we put the gravel in first. You'll open the box, pour the gravel in, shake it, make sure it distributes evenly around the tank. And then you're going to do the same thing for each one of your actual media boxes. Now, if you have a helper that can actually hold the the funnel and kind of shake the tank to help the media fall in. That helps too. Also, I recommend that you wear safety goggles and an actual face mask to prevent you from breathing in any kind of dust coming off of this. If this is in an area that's somewhat finished and whatnot, then I will even go as far as holding a shop vac in the area that'll suck the dust to it as you're filling it. It keeps it from settling around everything in the particular room that you're working on. So just take care to fill this and fill it as evenly as possible. Make sure that distributor doesn't move out of the center. And then once you put all the media in, you can take your funnel out and then obviously take off your tape. Now, once you've done that, if it's possible, this is a good time to fill the tank with water because we want that media to saturate and settle, and it'll also reduce the amount of rinse time that we'll have when we bring it online. If this is already kind of saturated, then it tends to rinse out quicker than if there's nothing in the tank. If you can't do it, no big deal. Just know it might take a little bit longer to rinse this thing out when we go to put it online. So now we went over filling the tank. I'm not going to fill this tank. It's a brand new tank, so I'm not going to fill it for the purpose of this video, but just so you get the idea of how that goes in and what the procedure is there. Once this tank is full, then that's when we'll kind of move it into place and then start lining up our plumbing. So I'm going to get this in place. We're going to move the media out of the way, and then we'll start preparing the valve and getting ready to install the system to the plumbing. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is prepare the valve. When you pull the valve out of the box, the part that actually mounts to the tank is a threaded connection here, but there's a couple O-rings in here. There's an O-ring inside here that actually seals around that distributor tube, and then there's an O-ring here that seals around this nylon surface to actually seal the water in the tank. We send packets of grease with our system, so you can put a little bit of grease on here and then put a little bit of grease around here, and that way this will not hang up on that distributor when you screw it in, and it also facilitates a better seal because this doesn't tend to stick or bunch. So make sure you use some of that grease for that. We're going to use this again for something else in a little while, so you don't want to disregard this. You just want to put a little bit on here on both O-rings and then put it at the side for a little while. Now I'm not going to open that packet. I got my own grease over here I'm going to use. Okay, now once we put the grease on, there's another piece that'll be in your box, and this is called the upper basket. Now this upper basket will actually snap into the bottom of this valve. Just push it in and turn, it locks in. What this does is this keeps the media from coming out of the valve during a backwash. Typically after a month or so of use, the media will never be light enough to reach this point, but at first we like to put these in there because we don't want to take a chance of actually blowing media out. So this is really a safety precaution. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual operation of the filter. It's just here to keep that media from blowing out when we're doing a backwash. So once we've lubed everything up and we got this in place, now we can actually put the valve on the tank. So you'll line that center distributor tube over the cone over the tube, slide it down, and then kind of wiggle it around till you get it to start in the threads. Now these things should just easily spin in the threads. If it doesn't spin in easily, then you may have it cross-threaded. Now sometimes, even like right now when I'm doing it, it doesn't want to pop it onto the distributor tube, the O-ring doesn't, so you kind of got to play with it. But see, once you get it, it's going to spin right in, literally that easy. So you're going to tighten it as far as you can with your hand, and then I take my palm of my hand and just give it a couple taps just to snug it. And then once you have that done, your tank's basically sealed now, and we're ready to actually start making our connections. Now what you want to do is make sure you plumb this in the correct way, because if you plumb it in backwards, you're not going to get good treatment, and you may actually blow some of the media out. So I don't know if we can get in here. Let me see if I can get the light angle right. But there's actually a couple arrows on the bypass, and then there's a couple arrows on the actual valve itself. The arrow that's pointing towards the unit is the inlet, and the arrow pointing away from the unit is the outlet. Keep that in mind when you're actually getting ready to start laying this out. Now the other thing too is the bypass valve. Right now you can see the bypass valve, these two valves are in line with the plumbing connections. That would indicate that this is in service and water's going through the tank. Now when we do it for startup, we're going to want these in the bypass position. and that's when the handles are bisecting the plumbing. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that there now, and we're gonna start to plumb this in. Now, I wanna show you a couple other things too while we're here. In your installation kit, you're gonna get some different fitting options here. You're gonna get 3/4 elbow fittings or 1-inch straight fittings. Now, if you have 1-inch plumbing, then obviously you use the 1-inch. If you have the 3/4, you use the 3/4. Now, if you need something straight, maybe you do a 1-inch and reduce it to a 3/4, or however you want to do it. But these actual fittings have O-rings on here that we're going to lube up, and then these clips come out of the back, and you can push these fittings directly in here and put the clips back in and hold them in. So what I like to do is I go ahead and plumb my fittings into my plumbing parts. Now, obviously, if you're using copper or something like that, you're going to have to, mock it up and then plumb them in place. For me today, I'm using these flexible install hoses just to make this quick and simple for the install video. Now, we have these on our website as well if you want to use these, but these basically have a rubber seal in the end that will seal directly on these elbows, so I can actually just install these on the elbow and tighten everything down, and then I can make my final connection quickly with just pushing it in and putting the actual clips in. So this is how I'll do it in the field. We're going to break for now, and I'm going to put all this together, and then we'll kind of show you how it's plumbed together once I have it finished. Okay, now once we've actually plumbed in our plumbing, and this is crude, like I said, because these are flex hoses and I'm trying to do something quick here, but in your final installation, if you're doing hard plumbing or whatever, you're making it as uniform as possible and make sure that everything is secured. I have this somewhat secured here, but when you do your plumbing, make sure everything's secured. You really don't want your plumbing hanging on your system where the weight of the plumbing's pushing down on the bypass and anything. And there's some flexibility here, but we don't want it in a bind. So make sure everything kind of fits nice and freely, and make sure everything's secured when you're finished. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is hook up the drain line, because when this backwashes and rinses, the water that is coming from there, the waste, is going to have to go to a drain source. It's crucial that your drain source can accept the flow rate of your backwashing filter. As we said before, softeners and some other equipment are going to be much lower flow rates as far as backwashing. But when we get to backwashing filters, such as carbon and sediment filters, things like that, we may be somewhere, from 5 to 10 to 15 gallons per minute backwash. So it's really important that you have a good drain source. Typically an 1.5-inch pipe, or if you got a floor drain, you can run it to that. And then make sure you observe your local codes too. If you need to put in an air gap, make sure you put that in. It's always recommended that is done. That prevents bacteria from making its way back up to your valve here. So again, make sure your drain source can accept the flow rate that you're going to be sending to it. And now the system doesn't come with drain line. Drain line we sell separately. It's the main reason why is because everybody's application differs, so we couldn't really come up with a set size a piece or whatever that would fit everybody's needs without being wasteful or not giving enough. So you'll need to buy this. You can buy it local if you want. It's 1/2-inch ID and 5/8 OD, or you can buy it from our site. I think we have it for 58 cents a foot or something like that. But this tubing will actually fit in 1/2-inch CTS quick connect fittings too, but this tubing is going to go onto the drain line barb here, and you want to push it up as far as you can on there, because again, this is going to drain with force, and depending on the size, it may drain with quite a bit of flow rate. So once you have it on there, put a hose clamp on there, and make sure you get that tightened down and make sure it's secured on there, because we don't want this to blow off in the middle of the night, because it will put quite a bit of water out onto the floor. So once your drain line is completed, there's also a transformer, and there's the grease that we give you to grease everything up as far as the O-rings. But the transformer's in the installation box too. You'll also notice that there is an Allen wrench here. This Allen wrench is designed to help you turn this bypass when there's water pressure on it. It gives you a little bit of leverage. Now you wouldn't want to use it exclusively because it will break, it's plastic, but it's something to kind of help give you a little bit of leverage when you turn these. So a lot of people leave these in the bypass, you can do that, or it actually has a little eyelet if you want to put a little chain and just have it close here just so you have it when you need it. But I'm going to stick it in there because we're going to use it during startup here in a minute. Now, I already have a transformer plugged in the wall because there's a test rack here, so I'm going to go ahead and just plug that in. And what we're going to talk about now is the startup procedure and then programming. So we're going to change camera angles here and get around to the front, and we're getting close to being finished with this project. So, okay, before we start up, we're going to go ahead and talk about programming now, just so we can do it in one camera angle here. In the manual, it'll actually have you start up first and then we'll go to programming, but we're going to do programming now because I want to talk about a couple different features that are on here that aren't necessarily used for this particular valve, and it kind of confuses people. So when we program this from the factory, pretty much all the hard programming is done. You'll just need to do your own personal programming or your first level programming. If you go to the screen and you see it'll actually be scrolling through some different parameters. To get to the actual programming part, we're going to have to push and release the set button so we can get the date and time back on here, because without that on there we can't enter the actual programming mode. So once you see that date and time, push and hold this settings button, and you'll see the time of day and you'll see a cursor there. Now this is when you can actually change the time of day. Right now it's 2:22 p.m. here, so we're going to leave 2 there, and we're at 22. Actually it just went to 23, and then we're going to go to the next cycle here, which is AM. We're going to change that to PM. You definitely want to make sure this is on the correct 12-hour cycle, AM or PM, because if not, this could backwash in the middle of the day, and yet you don't want that because untreated water can get through while you're using it. So we have the time put in, and then it's going to ask for the date. It's saying 2002. It's a little off there. We're going to bring it up to 2016. And then it's not December. It's actually June. That's why we're sweating like crazy trying to make this video. And then today is the 24th. So once we put the date and the time in there, then it's going to ask you regen days. What this is the frequency of days between when this is going to backwash. Now, for iron filters and certain applications, 3 days is going to be typical. Some applications may be as low as 1 day. Carbon filters that are being used just to remove chlorine or chloramines primarily are going to be out to 7 days. So depending on what this system is, as far as the media in it and what you're using it for, depends on what that day setting would be. If you have questions about that, you can talk to your original salesperson, or if you just want to call and ask for some technical help as far as your frequencies, you can call 1-800-608-8792. But we'll be able to tell you, based on what you're trying to do and where it fits in your actual treatment application line. We'll be able to tell exactly what this day should be set to. But for now, we're going to leave this at 3 because this is a generalized video, and we're going to go to the next setting here. The next setting says gallons. Now, a lot of people get a misconception that they can put a gallon value in here and then this will backwash based on that gallon value. That is not the case. If you put a gallon value in here, anything other than off, it will actually start to look for a meter, which is not here, and then it'll give you an error code and a beep. So if suddenly you get done and you get a beep, then go back and make sure that this gallons is set to off, because there's a good chance that might be what's going on there. So this particular settings, if it's not on off, put it on off by using the up or down arrows, but do not take it off if it's there, and leave it there. And then we're going to push and hit the settings button again, and then that comes back to regen time. Now, depending on what you have in your treatment scheme, depends on what time you're going to make this actual filter backwash. If you have a softener that's going to regenerate at 2 a.m. when it does regenerate, then obviously you wouldn't want this particular system to regenerate at that time as well. You want to make sure that this is offset by about an hour. So we're going to assume that there's a softener in place, so we're going to take this down to 1 o'clock. and it goes in 15-minute increments there. So 1 a.m. and then you're going to get programming complete. And basically now the system's programmed. I mean, really the only thing that's different to your specific site would be, you know, obviously the time of day and you know, the type of regen time, but more crucially the frequencies between regeneration. So if you don't know what that is, feel free to give us a call and we'll try to help you determine the proper frequency between backwashes. We're going to change camera angles now. We're going to talk about startup and then we'll wrap up here. All right, once we've had this program, now we're going to get ready to start it up. To start this up, we want to put it in a backwash mode. That helps to push all the air out of the system. Hopefully you were able to fill this with water and it's been soaking. If not, this whole process will take a little longer. But the idea is in the backwash mode, the water comes in that center tube and goes all the way to the bottom, and then it comes up through the media, and by default it pushes all the air out of the top and out the drain. So that's the main reason why we want to start it up in backwash, just so we can get that big air pocket out of there. Now, if you didn't fill it with water, then we're going to have to fill it slower as far as letting the water in, and then also it may have to rinse a little longer. So you may even have to initiate a second, regeneration and backwash just to get the water clear, because that's the whole goal here. Is when we backwash and rinse this in this mode, we want the water to be clear and free of air when we're finished. So first and foremost, we're going to put this into a backwash. So again, if your screen's locked, you may have to push the settings button for 3 seconds to unlock it. But if it's not locked, then you should be able to just push this manual button and hold it. This manual button will initiate an immediate regeneration. You'll see it says regen immediately. Now, once that goes away, you'll see where it says advancing to backwash. When this actually gets to backwash and starts to show a time value counting down, which should be 10 minutes, that's typically how we have these set up from the factory. But once that starts to happen, that's when we're going to start to introduce water to the actual system. So let's give it a second here to get to the backwash mode. And then here, yeah, it's actually not programmed properly, but anyway, once it starts counting down, typically this would be on 10 minutes, but once it starts counting down, that's when we're going to actually start to open our inlet on our bypass. So remember, the inlet's the one with the arrow pointing towards the system. So during this time, you're going to slowly open this up, and when I say slowly, we want to just crack it open, like maybe just a little eighth of a turn, and you'll hear water start to come in. Now, if you open it too far, you're going to get a real loud knock in here, because that air is going to be knocking around. Again, if it was already filled, then this won't take very long. You'll blow the air out pretty quick. But over this backwash period, like I said, which typically is 10 minutes, you're going to slowly open this inlet valve until it's completely open. And then once it's completely open, then you're going to continue to let it backwash until you see the water coming from your drain is clear and free of air. Now, after this backwash mode is done, and like I said, you'll probably need all of 10 minutes to put this through there, especially if this tank's empty. But once the backwash mode's done, it'll automatically advance to rinse, and it'll say advancing to rinse. Now, I just forced it there, but typically it'll go through the whole 10-minute process, and then it'll move on to rinse. Now, in the rinse mode, we're actually pushing water down from the top and then into the distributor tube at the bottom and out and out. So what we're doing now is we're rinsing the actual media in the flow direction that it would be in the service flow. So during the rinse mode, and it takes quite a while to get around to rinse mode from backwash, by the way, because you have to turn, the cam has to turn all the way around in here, so it takes a while. But when you get to the rinse mode, you're just going to let it rinse until it's finished, and basically make sure that this water is clear. If it's not clear, then start this whole process over again with it still wide open, but just let it backwash and rinse again until it runs clear. Now, once it's went through its rinse mode, it's going to say advancing to service. And then once it gets back to the service mode and everything's clear, then basically it's online. But we still want to open up the outlet on the bypass valve, so that way it'll let water out to the home. So what we're going to do before we open the outlet is we're going to open a spigot downstream, or a faucet, or a shower tub faucet, something like that, something that's kind of open ported. And go ahead and open that up to where you have some air coming out of it, and then open up this bypass valve slowly. And you're going to slowly open that up until you get all the air out of your plumbing system at your spigot, and then open it completely until it's fully open. Now, after you've done this, basically you've put this online, it's online now. You just want to go downstream and make sure that water's running clear and the air's out of it. Once you've done that and it's programmed, then it's going to regenerate and everything on its own from there, as far as whatever daily frequency that you've put in there. Again, depending on what type of filter you have, depends on where it will go in your system, how many days between the backwashes, and you know, the flow rate. So make sure you get that information, you know, before you do the install. If not, you can always give us a call at 1-800-608-8792, and we'll be happy to help you out. Thanks.